It is an absolute delight today to be with Lenny Kislin, who is I'm going to let him describe himself because he is really an unbelievably unique individual in the Woodstock scene, a Woodstock artist and curator, etc. But really, this is going to be about Lenny and his role, his road to where he is now. So Lenny, it's a pleasure to be with you. Actually, I should say, I have a website, Why Woodstock, and I interviewed Lenny about, probably over a year ago. I remember it was winter, and I tried to write the article on several occasions, and I couldn't because it was such a rich environment Lenny was talking about. And so I kept saying, I'm going to write it, and he would quip, yes, hopefully within our lifetimes you'll finish it after a while. So then I got the idea, since I wanted to launch Conversations Over Cappuccino, which this is the first in the series. So I said, I don't have to write a thing, I could just let Lenny talk. And anyway, Lenny, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm going to get behind the camera now so we can just let you go. So just tell me about yourself and your road to where you are and how you see yourself and wherever you want to go.
Well, if we start at the beginning, we have to go back to the Southeast Bronx. This is where I was raised until I was 11, and I was almost killed violently twice.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about that? That sounds kind of interesting.
I can tell you about the one that I really, really felt like I was going to be dying. We used to hang out on the street. I was the son of someone who owned a pet shop, and I was raised basically in that pet shop and on the streets around it. It was in the Southeast Bronx, not far from the East River. And when we played, it was more fighting than playing with the kids on the street. I was one of the younger ones, so they allowed me to play with them if I take their punches before we began to play. And that was my initiation per day. One day, everyone was talking about this car around the corner that had burnt, got all burned, and the fire department had just put it out, but it was smoldering, lots of steel and broken glass. And a bunch of the kids that I hung out with started to take whatever they could out of the car, loot the car, so to speak. And I was leaning against a fire hydrant right near the car, but not doing what the other kids were doing because I didn't have that in me. So the guy who owned the car came out of the bar on the corner that he was getting drunk at, and he went crazy when he saw all these kids taking whatever they could out of his car, even though it was probably burnt. So I sat there on the hydrant while he ran after all the other kids, trying to get them, trying to catch them. And they were running away and much faster than he was. So he saw me on the hydrant, and all of a sudden he comes over to me and picks me up and throws me into the car. Because he had someone to blame for it, because I didn't feel guilty, so I didn't run away. Said, I'm going to take you to the river, which was a block and a half away. And I knew he was not in the mood to
To negotiate.
to negotiate.
To hear explanations.
So he threw me into the passenger side of the car.
Right.
Everything was hot and broken, and I knew that I better get away from this guy, so I dove through the driver's side window. That was all broken. And I made it to get away from him, and I ran away around the corner to my father's pet shop with both wrists bleeding all over the place. And I walked into the store, and they looked at me and they said, "What happened?" And I didn't want to tell my father because I knew he would run around the street and start to fight with the guy. The guy was a giant. He was a giant, and I thought he would kill my father, so I didn't say anything. Someone came in off the street and told him what had happened. He did what I thought he would do. He ran around the corner and actually got into a mortal fight with this guy.
Really?
Yeah. And the police came while it was going on, and they were arresting both guys. But the neighborhood spoke up for my father.
Right.
So the guy was taken to jail, and that was that.
Right.
But I was deadly afraid. I thought that this guy was going to kill me.
Really?
I was nervous every day of my young life. And at that point in time, I felt like I was going to die very young. Because all these things going on around me and me not being able to solve any of the problems, and my father didn't really understand what I was going through on the streets when I wasn't in the pet shop. In the pet shop, I had to work. I had to clean out dead fish in the morning. I had to clean the puppy cages and the cat cages and the bird cages, and it was a tough job.
Tough job. This was
especially
in the Bronx.
when I was
this
going
is
to
still
school.
in the Bronx.
Yeah, this is the Bronx.
Yeah.
And I never really had a place to lie down and rest over the course of every day. It tore at me. It made me feel like, what the hell am I here for? What is going on here?
Go
And I
ahead.
used to have to analyze myself and everything that was going on in order to stay sane. I didn't know about the concept of sanity, but I was trying to keep myself sane just by thinking of everything and trying to figure out what's going on. And that kind of continued. And finally, my father moved us to a nice little house out in Queens, which was for me like going from hell to heaven. But one problem was that I had gotten used to dealing with insanity and primitive people, and I went to Queens, and all of a sudden everyone was civilized. And then I became really insecure, and I tried to find ways to fit in, and I became one of the tough guys. It was like a total switch.
Wow.
And I was the one, I was still a smart guy, I was still a good athlete, so I was in all the smart classes, I was an athlete all over the place playing all kinds of ball, but I was one of the tough guys. And we used to fight among ourselves, just mostly fake fighting, but making those around us kind of fearful. It took me till high school. Until high school, I was kind of really nervous and afraid of not being, not of not being killed, but of not being up to the level of these socialized people. So in high school, I learned how to really be a social kind of guy who didn't have to be crude and primitive.
What was it about the high school experience that did that?
Well, I got into all these really high courses, all honor corps, and the people that I was associated with. Luckily, I had training earlier. I was in this SP class that I went to junior high for 7th and 9th grade, skipping the 8th. Took all kinds of tests, did well on the tests.
All right.
Got into all these honor corps classes in high school, and I learned how to be civilized and not be crazy, which I was, and I probably still have some of that in me, but I try to use it in a creative way at this point. And several years. For several years, I've tried to use what was a little crazy in me in a creative way.
Okay, so now we're gonna project after that. You went to law school, is that correct?
Yep.
So you are a lawyer.
My father wanted me to go
Sorry,
to law school.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But I knew what I learned from law school is what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And after graduation, 2 weeks after graduation, my wife and I moved up to Woodstock. It was a magical thing that we found Woodstock. And this was after the festival.
This was when, about?
We bought the land in 1970 and
So
we
about a year
started
after.
building it in the summer of 71.
And you knew nothing about, from what you told me, you
Knew
knew
nothing about
building.
building. One of my friends who had had 6 credits of architecture decided he was going to help us build this house. He knew the rudimentary stuff he had to know, but there was a lot he didn't know, which caused great temporary grief as we tried to build this house. We spent far more over the course of the next 5 years than we were supposed to spend. I've never felt poor in my life before, but at this point we were feeling poor. My wife and I were going through something neither one of us had ever done before. And what happened with the house, it didn't take one summer to build. It took 5 years of continually getting money to build a new part and money to build the next part. And
it truly is an amazing house now. You've really...
Thanks. Thank you.
It's really a wonder.
It's a different kind of house.
Tell me about the beams. You said you...
Well, can they see the beams?
Yeah, I'll take a picture
All right.
of the beams.
The beams...
I'll do it right on.
We wanted to overbuild the house so everything was strong.
Right.
So in order to build these beams, I had to use, I think they're 2 by 10s or 12s,
Right.
and they're very, very long.
Yeah, they are.
And I had to walk each beam up a ladder, each end.
Right.
First I'd walk one end up, and then I'd go to and rest it on the sill,
It's amazing.
and then I'd walk the other one up and bang a nail into it so it stayed up there.
Right.
Went back to the other side, bang nails into, and then I added another beam right beside it so it stayed strong.
Right.
And we just built this whole thing. All the angles of the house are different, so we really gave ourselves something to do
Yeah.
that was almost impossible.
Yeah. It is impossible.
So it drove us a little batty over the years.
Right.
And
Yes, and
With our own
these are the beams that, as you say,
everything else.
they're long beams, and you figured out a way to put them up
Walk
there.
a beam up on one side, then go to the other side and walk the other end up and attach there, and then come back and attach there.
And this, actually I'm just going to walk around. Sorry if it's a little bit shaky here, but it is what it is. Now, and there's the equipment and stuff, but, so this is a sunken, kind of a sunken room.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us about that a little bit? How you...
It was another dimension. I mean, if you look at this house, the dimensions are unlike most houses. The walls are not the same height as you go along the wall. We have sides to this place that are all crazy all around it, and it was made it that much harder to build. And what else did you want to know?
Well, just, I guess just about the concept of the house, and it's just...
My friend designed the crux of the main part of the design. Nancy designed the roof,
Which is...
which is slanted. You can see it. It comes down, so it takes off the right amount of moisture, and whether it's raining or snowing, it kind of drains off the roof the correct way.
Okay, now...
It's basically a one-story flat house, but it's not flat. But along the course of that time, I found a way to make money,
Okay, and that was...
which was kind of miraculous. A friend of mine was going to be opening an antique store in Catskill, and he saw me over the course of the winter of 70, the winter of 71 into 72, and I was miserable. I was saying, what the heck am I going to do? 72, 73. Because in the summer of 72, what we did was sell all the engagement gifts we got while we lived in New York, because we needed to make some money. We ran out of those, and we said, what the hell are we going to do now? So on this trip with this guy, we went up to Albany to find stuff for him to buy to feed the shop, to give some stock to the his stock, his shop. So I'm feeling like I was his guest. Oh, let me preface. Before I left, my wife gave me $10 and said, please don't spend this. That's how poor we were. And I went up with him, took the $10, and we hit a shop somehow. Fate, you talk about fate, this was fate. The guy who was running the shop weighed items in his hand, and if an item was heavy, it was 50 cents, and if it was light, it was 25 cents.
Nice.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
So
Great.
I found all kinds of stuff for my friend to buy, and whatever he didn't want that I liked, I bought.
Right.
And I spent the whole $10.
Your forbidden $10.
I spent the whole $10, and the idea occurred to me, like, we sold things at the flea market in Woodstock when it was at the Playhouse, and it was very successful.
Same flea market.
Same flea market. So this time we were going to go back to the flea market after having spent the winter going to different auctions in Kingston and buying whatever we could because we didn't have a lot to spend. And at that time, American folk art was not really sought after. Most of the people up here were trying to buy oak furniture and porcelain and glass and jewelry and all kinds of things that probably rich people had in the day, way back. So we didn't have the money to compete with these people and didn't know anything about what they were doing, but we bought what our eye led us to. What we felt that, oh, that's cool, and that's cool. And this is at that time before what we liked was very popular. So when it came time for the first day of this year's flea market, we went there, we set up these things that we had bought. In the first 5 minutes, some woman came over to me. We had bought this beautiful little...
Oh, was your wife upset with you that you spent the $10?
She cried.
She cried?
She cried.
Really?
Yeah. It was a...
Wow.
But I said, Nance, I think I found a way to make money for us. We're going to buy stuff to sell at the flea market.
Amazing, right?
So
did that make her feel better or no? It's just
no, not yet.
Not yet.
It took this first moment
Right.
where this woman comes over to me and says, how much is that quilt? This log cabin quilt that we bought for $20.
Right.
And I looked at her, I looked at Nancy, I looked back at the woman, and I said, $75. And she said, well, I think I'll take that.
That was it.
And there was this silent thunderclap.
Right.
And I looked at Nancy, and when the woman walked away, I said, did you see what just happened?
You made $1.
On one object, I made $55.
Right.
So, to cut to the chase here, we sold continually objects that we were finding. We were able to buy up here. Once the flea market was kind of over, we'd still buy up here and take it down to New York, to other flea markets in New York. Now down there, they didn't get the stuff we got up here. This was the country. There was all kinds of primitive material everywhere.
Right.
So we would buy up here, live up here, and go down there to sell on weekends.
I see.
It just went up and up and up. We started making really good money. I was finding great stuff. I found that I had a good eye.
And the original $10 items, they sold well.
Oh, they sold quickly. They were gone quickly.
So
as we got to do better and better shows, I started to realize in my hunting that I was finding things that I knew weren't that readily saleable, but still had something about them that made me want to keep them. And in my head, I was kind of preparing for a future in art, which became...
Did you know that at the time?
I felt I wanted to do art with these pieces.
Oh,
I
that's
didn't want to
interesting.
get rid of
So,
them for
right,
nothing,
right. Oh,
and
so
they
you
were too
knew.
good to get
Right,
rid of,
right.
and I just kept storing up pieces for the future that I was going to do art.
Right.
Well, eventually this house was covered. The floors, you had to step over things to
Right.
get through the house.
Right.
My wife was going crazy.
Right.
So she was going to be going to down to Florida to visit her parents.
Right.
So she said to me, Len, if you don't make one piece of sculpture, I was hesitating all the time. I didn't want to put holes in things.
Right.
And each piece to me was kind of something that should be revered.
Right.
And here I was thinking of putting holes
Revered
in them to
because
join
of
them
its
up.
past and it's,
Oh, it comes out of time to me,
Right,
you know.
right,
and
right.
I hunted and worked to find it, but still, it came down through time to me.
Right.
And I felt some real responsibility towards these pieces.
Right.
At first, I didn't want to hurt them, but then it got to the point. She said, if you don't make a sculpture, I'm throwing all this out. I'm bringing it to the dump, and that's it. Now, that was a lot of money. I spent a lot of money on that stuff.
Buying junk, right?
So
Presses.
I actually wound up making my first piece. And there was a show on Madison Avenue the week after my father died. This was 1991, he died in December. And a week after he died, there was an article in my weekly newspaper that it was for the business, and it said a big ad wanted the art of the dealer. This was one of the famous American art dealers, antique American art and folk art. And he said, if you're a dealer in antiques or art and you make your own art, come down to, it was on Madison Avenue, this gallery, right above Park Bennett, which at that time didn't exist anymore. And we set up a show at the Coliseum in New York with antiques that we had for sale. And I had made an appointment to go visit this guy to see whether he would jury me into his show or not. So I brought this first piece down to him, and he laughed and said, "You're in." So what this piece was a 19th century heavy wooden bowling ball.
Right.
Probably lignum vitae, which was a very hard, unusual, difficult to find wood. And I mounted this on a small plinth, a little base. There was a crack right through the ball that made it cheap for me to buy and unsaleable in the antiques
That's an
market.
antique.
So in this crack, I inserted what they call a carpenter's traveler, and it was a round, almost like a blade. This piece was 200 years old, and it started about that thick in the middle and went out and tapered to a kind of sharp edge. There was a little notch on the edge, and what the carpenters did, they didn't have long Lufkin rulers that you could roll out a tape and measure a distance on a board. So they counted the number of rotations that they had to go down the board, that they were the size of the board they were going to use, and they were able to keep repeating that exact size with this roller. It rolled down the board. So I stuck this blade that had a nice iron handle on it into the crack. Perfect fit. The handle, I put a mannequin, an old mannequin hand onto the ball itself, attached at the wrist, holding this handle and pulling the blade through the ball, which was a whole entity. And I said, I called it Suicide, which was a tough title, but it seemed to refer to the piece perfectly. So that's the piece I brought down to this guy, and opening night, I was on my way to my first show, and it was on Madison Avenue.
Now, he had other things for you from your...
Not from me, but he had other people's,
people's, right.
other artists, you know,
Right.
dealers that I knew.
Mhm.
And I got down there an hour and a half late because there was a dragnet on the New York Thruway. They were looking for the transvestite murderer who had just escaped from prison.
Oh,
And it took me an hour and a half to get through this 1 mile
right, stretch.
roadblock. We eventually got there. I see a group of tuxedoed men coming out into the long black limousine, and I went into the building and went upstairs, and there was a red circle on my piece, you know, on the
Right.
label, covering the price. So the guy who owned this gallery, his name was Alexander Acevedo. If you looked him up, you'd see what he was. And he said, "You sold your piece for $2,500. Now, I had spent $37 in materials
Wow, right,
to make this piece.
right, wow.
And there, $2,500, I got into all the antique weekly magazines and newspapers. And
Because it was your first sale? Or
well,
it
because
was-
I was one of the ones who actually
Oh, I
sold
see.
there.
Right, right, right,
And from then on, I felt I have to continue this.
right.
And for me to be able to get a solo show where it was all my work, I knew I had to keep making art to get a supply together, to have enough. So I joined the Woodstock Artists Association because there you can submit a piece a month, and if it gets accepted, you can't put it in again. So you'd have to keep making pieces to
You have
get
to be
into all the
productive,
shows.
right.
And I knew I'm probably the hardest working lazy man on earth. But when I have to do something, I push myself.
Right,
And I did that, and I got a lot of good work done. Over the course of the time, I was winning a lot of awards in the Artists Association.
right,
And finally, after a year of pressing this promoter in New York, who was at that time doing the Triple Pier show on the Hudson River,
right.
where there were 600 dealers, finally she gave me a show where I could see these were antique shows.
Right.
So they didn't want to sell new stuff,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was made totally of old stuff.
Right.
But I went to her, they were selling tables made out of old iron gating, they were selling pillows made out of cut up Persian rugs, lamps made out of iron that was for something else. And I said, look, you let all these people sell these things that are new, made from old stuff, they're utilitarian, yes, but why can't you show my art in this show, which is not utilitarian, but it's still totally made up of old things.
Right.
So she thought about it for a year, and finally she
Really?
said,
Took
we're
her a year
going
to
to
say,
give you a
wow,
show, we're going to
nice.
make you the star of the show, and write up what you do, and the theme was things you can make with old stuff.
Right.
And they gave me a booth right in the front of the pier, the middle pier.
This is your own booth now.
My own booth. Nobody could get through the show without passing my art.
Nice.
And she didn't charge me anything for it.
Nice.
And I was there for 2 weekends setting up 2 different shows with the 27 pieces that I brought down to do this show. I'm going to not talk about what it felt like each time a piece sold.
Oh, you got to tell me. Just tell me
Oh
about
man,
that.
the first time a piece sold, I was disbelieving. Because we had to price this stuff. In New York, you have to price
Right.
everything you put out.
Right.
And someone came along and went crazy over one of the pieces
Right.
and actually bought it.
Right.
Then another person came along and bought another piece. Then another person came along and bought
Just
2
bought it,
pieces.
Wow.
And my heart is flipping inside.
Right. What an achievement.
Over the course, well, one guy who came through said, I'm a real buyer. How much for that, and that?
Wow.
Oh, God. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
So I gave him a decent price, and he bought them all. He bought them all. And then he said to me, but you'll have to bring them to my office on, I think it was First Avenue, that's in, at 53rd Street or 49th Street, I'm not sure which one it was, but he had a building, and his office was on the 5th floor. They had an elevator that could take up my van
Right.
to the top. He said, you have to deliver it to my office, and I went, and I brought the pizza to his office. And then he said, you can show me whatever you do, and I'm interested in buying. This was the president of Smith and Walensky Steakhouse in New York,
Right.
and at that time they were involved in building all over the country new restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy used old Americana to decorate. And my stuff was made up of old Americana.
Mm-hmm.
So over the course of time, he bought over 100 of my pieces.
Wow.
And with that occurrence, people started looking at me in a different way in Woodstock, because every artist dreams about selling.
Yeah.
And here I actually was lucky enough to find a way to sell my art.
Yeah.
I had been doing antique shows for years and years, and I was able to translate that into another show
Right.
of selling my artwork.
Right.
And it was the most amazing thing that happened to me.
Right.
It was great. It was like hitting a home run. I've hit home runs in my life. I got my wife, I got my kids. It was just one of those
amazing.
occurrences
Right.
that takes you and makes a new person. It makes a new
Now, tell
person.
me about
out
this
of you.
new person. Tell me about this transition.
Well, it opened up another side of the world to me, and after that I became the chairman at the Woodstock Artists Association for 6 years. I made lots of friends in art. When I finally retired from the chairmanship, there was this restaurant across the street called Oriole 9. Most
now,
of
when
you
is
know
this?
about it.
When is this? Because
This
this
is,
is actually how I first heard about you, through the Oriole 9.
Well, I've been doing it for probably over 10 years now. We're right now, at this moment, in the 98th show
Yeah, which
that
is
I've
amazing.
curated there. And when I say curate, I not only went around to the artists, but also made the shows. I put them up. This is when I was physically able to do that. And it caught on, and it's still there. And
And the shows are how often?
every month.
Every month.
Every month I put up a different show. And I went to the owners when I first came up with this concept, because I knew that most of the artists in Woodstock did not have a great place to show. They could show at the WAAM, get one piece in at a time, or if they're really lucky, get a solo show at the WAAM for 1 month out of the year, and that's hard to do now. So I went to the owners, Luke and Nina, and I said, look, these walls are getting boring. I had been eating there for a year and a quarter, or close to a year and a half. And I said, I can change the art and put up really good art every month,
Every month.
and I won't charge you anything
Right.
to do it.
Right.
Because that's how strongly I felt about
Right.
getting a place for the artists.
Right.
And
Which
they
is
agreed,
wonderful.
they put up a whole hanging system, and it started, and it's turned into a really great venue.
And they love it there now.
Everyone loves it.
Everyone
It's something
loves it,
that
right?
distinguishes a restaurant in the town in a different way than restaurants usually get acknowledged.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, no, it's an exceptional thing to do, and that's how I first heard about you, through your.
yeah, this is
your-
one of the things that I've accomplished,
Yeah,
besides making and selling art all over
and
the
then
place.
you moved to New World Cooking.
And they came and asked for me to do that too, because they really liked what I did at Oriole 9,
Mhm.
and I got involved in there. But at that point, I made a different agreement, because I had been doing it for so many years, and I was getting tired. I felt myself getting weaker, and I knew the work is very hard, very
Right.
difficult. And I said, what would you like your commission to be? And they said, we don't need a commission. So at that point I said, do you mind if I take a commission? And they said, not at all. So I decided to take a 20% commission.
Uh-huh.
And that was the beginning of that. Right now, they've decided that they just wanted my art on the walls, because they said that's what makes the restaurant look the way they want it to look.
Right.
So that kind of brought the curating there to a halt, except I curate myself.
Your own stuff.
And it's, I've had to call people recently and tell them, look, you're going to have to wait till next year for Oriole 9, because
There's so many.
I can't, Oriole 9 is filled for the year,
Yeah.
and they're not going to want other art in New World.
Now I'm going to break actually out behind this, okay?
Yeah.
And what I want you to do now is just talk about your art, okay? Because it's really exceptional. It's not just putting things together.
Right.
So I'm going to just break so I can actually, the house is amazing because, and he said that when you said I had to interview you, he said, yes, I agree to interview, but you have to do it in my house because you have to see my house.
Well, you've seen my house long before we decided to do a film.
Well, the film, but I mean, when I was trying to do write an interview,
Right.
you said it has to be here. And
Right.
the reason it has to be here, which I'm going to take one of the cameras off and actually show it, is because the house is, it's an
Well,
artistic
you
wonder.
can get-
So why don't you just talk about that while I
You
set
can get
this
a
up?
new perspective of me when you see what I produce in my own art. And when you don't come into this house to see what's going on around here, it's kind of you don't really know me. You don't get to know me until you see what I do in art. And most of the town has gotten to know me because I have exhibited a great amount of stuff. One thing I want to mention, one night I was holding a man's, from the 19th century, carved little sculpture in my hand.
All right.
And I was looking at it, and all of a sudden this concept came to me that I was communing with this man. I said to him, you are not gone. You are here. And I'm feeling your mind, I'm feeling your creativity, your work, and here you are in my hand and in my brain, and you are not dead. You're existing at this moment in my being. And I actually started to cry.
All right.
I mean, I cried thinking about this. Here I am with a partial soul from the past. And it was soon after that that I realized that one of the reasons I fell in love with this stuff that most people at the time weren't even interested in, because I came to start to understand that when I was younger, I thought I was going to die young. And I always kept that inside me. And I started to collect things. The first thing I can remember, I collected rocks off the streets of the Bronx. And they were usually quartz pebbles that somehow got there. And that was my first rock. And mica on a little hill in the next block. And eventually I started reading a golden book about rocks. And in this golden book, there were listings of where you could go for rocks out west. And I started to go out west hunting for stones.
Wow.
And stones are ancient, as
Yes, they're amazing.
you know.
I love stones.
And they're beautiful if you
my
get the right
life.
things.
Yeah.
So I started to collect really good stones.
Some of this really amazing, amazing room, which you see every place is just plastered.
Now this is only the living room.
And this is only the living room. That's correct.
It's all over the house.
It's all
And it's a
over.
big house.
It's every room, every corner is covered with objects. So, do you want to talk about? Just tell us.
That would drive me crazy.
Well, just talk about one or two or
You
something.
pick out one. I'm not going to.
Oh, you know what I want to do? I'll tell you which one I want to pick out.
Early 1800s. For a baby to be put down in, and this is a young baby because it's not very high at the edges. And I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? I don't want to keep it or sell it just as a piece of furniture, because it's more than that. So I bought in New York, I went to a show and found 4 wonderful 19th century guitar molds. Half of one side, half of another side, that they wrapped the edge of the, when they were forming the wood for the edge of the guitar side, this is what they used to do it with. When I got home, I placed these guitar molds into the table, into what I call a table, but it was actually just a piece of furniture that was about that deep. And I placed these things, 2 of them at the bottom, 1 on each corner, facing each other, with the curves facing each other. And inside these structures, I had a whole collection of mother of pearl buttons that I saved over the years, and it filled the space between them in the table about that high, and it's a big table. And on top I put a piece of glass. On top of that I put the 2 smaller guitar molds, and I attached this beautiful wooden pig carving that I found somewhere along the line. And the pig is looking down into this, it looks like a river of mother of pearl buttons. And I called it Pearls Before Swine. Perfect for the piece.
Now, one thing I asked you was, how deep was the mother of pearl?
I'd say about 6 inches.
6 inches. And I said, why didn't...
5 to 6 inches.
Yes, I said, well, couldn't you have put a piece of wood underneath, right? And
Yes, I could have. Now, I'll explain that.
And what did you say?
When I put something out for people to see, I'm not trying to fool the eye, and I'm not trying to make more money. I know how hard it was for me to collect all these buttons, and I decided to use them all in one spot, just because I could. I had it, I wanted to use it, and this was, to me, a fabulous way to use it.
And when I asked you, do you remember what you said? I said, well, why didn't you put a piece of wood at the bottom? Because you'd use less. You said, and I said, no one would know. You said...
This is what I just said.
You said to me very specifically, I would know.
Oh, well,
which I thought was
I
delightful.
know what I said.
Yeah, well, that was what you said back then, and I thought that was delightful.
Right, and I do that with a lot of things.
Okay.
I collected...
This is the train wreck piece.
1930s, 40s pull toys that were trains. And I decided, instead of making them on a track, which is the way everyone would display this stuff, I decided to act like I was a cartoonist. And you know how in a cartoon, they can make these things and people or animals do whatever they want, and they can fall from a tall mountain and hit the ground and pop right up again and still be alive. They can do whatever they want. So I decided I'm going to do whatever I want with these trains, since I'm in control of how they get placed. And I think I've made, I don't know of another, the first sculpture of a train crash. And that's what that is. The title of that is The U.S. Economy. And it's no longer a train wreck waiting to happen.
When was that done?
I made that piece about 2 to 3 years ago.
2 to 3 years ago. Wow. Now this piece here with the, well, what are those, stockings or?
Oh, the thing on the wall there above the lamp. Those are old stocking display pieces, where in a store they would put a stocking on there and they would be stretched. I don't think they're stocking dryers, because the condition of them is basically they have a shine on them. And I figured I'm going to place them like make a tree or a bush. This one was a bush. I had made one that was a tree that sold. So this was a bush made out of these things. And it's called the dancing bush, because if it's looked at upside down, I think they're kind of plies.
Yes, delightful,
So that's the dancing bush.
delightful. Okay, now let's pick another one. There's so many, it's just really dizzying.
Now you should see the leaves through the back door is a great piece,
Okay, go ahead.
but it's not much contrast. I could describe it. The leaves came out of an old church, 19th century church. They're brass and they were inside as decoration. And the door is a trompe-l'oeil door. It looks like it's made up of different woods, but it's actually painted to look like that.
Oh, really? So it's only one piece, it's
And
one
all
piece
the
of wood?
leaves are joined, drill a hole, stick the stems through the back, attach the leaves into the back of the wood very securely, so those leaves are there to stay. Now, if you notice right up about a foot down to the right of the piece, from the top,
From the top?
you'll see a fly.
Oh,
Now that is an iron, late 19th century.
a foot from the
match
top.
bowl. You see the fly?
No,
Look hard. There's a fly.
on top. Is
Not all the way up, a foot down from the
a
top.
foot down.
Look with your eyes.
I'm trying.
6 inches
Oh yeah, there we
right.
are. Look at that. God, I had it, but wow,
I hid the fly on the piece. Just
nice.
as a surprise, if you look at it and all of a sudden you see the fly. I like to include a certain amount of animation in a lot of my pieces.
Wow,
So they
that fly is a
become
beautiful
alive
fly, actually.
As opposed to just there.
Now that was an art. Did you make that, or was that?
No,
or,
that's an actual iron match safe from the 19th century.
an iron what? I'm sorry.
Match safe. It held matches in it. You lifted the wings up, struck the match under the wings.
Oh, how
and that's the
delightful.
purpose. It was set on a table where people smoked.
That is
Smoking
delightful.
was big at that time.
Yes. Yes.
And I use these early creatures, insects, animals.
Oh, now this is a beautiful piece here, actually.
You could never, you probably could guess the title.
No, go ahead.
It's Hey Diddle Diddle,
Oh, there we go.
the cat and the fiddle.
And that's a beautiful.
Cat jumped over the moon.
That's a beautiful violin case.
Oh, that's
That's
probably the best violin case you'll ever see on earth.
It's magnificent.
It's carved from one piece of wood.
That is a magnificent piece in
And it's
itself.
heavy too.
Yes, I imagine.
Carved one piece of wood.
Do you know what type of wood that is?
No, I'm not aware. I'm not aware at this point.
It's a beautiful piece.
And that dish ran away with the spoon.
It's delightful.
Thank you.
Delightful. Now this is actually someone you helped. Is that correct?
Well, I
This-
discovered him at a flea market. I think it was 1983, somewhere around there.
and what's his name?
David Marshall. And he started working as an assistant to a surveyor. And he was sitting down resting at a riverside holding his machete because he cut through the brush to move places. And he started cutting into a stone with the point of his machete. And he saw he could actually do it. Then he started cutting stones with penknives, pocket knives. And he made all these sculptures.
Do you know what type of, is this bluestone?
It's creekstone. It seems to be hard, but whenever he went hunting for stones to use, he'd use a quarter, and if he could make
An impression.
an impression in the stone, he would take it and store it in water for a year.
Oh, really?
In a
Well, that's very interesting.
in a barrel of.
So
a
he would
barrel.
prepare them. That's fascinating.
And then they became even more easily cut.
And you helped him.
I started dealing in his stuff.
Yeah,
I got him into a great book.
yeah. And he made quite a reputation from that.
Yeah, it was a book made by Jay Johnson, who was one of the top folk art dealers who had a store on Madison Avenue, gallery.
Okay.
And, he wrote the 20th Century American Folk Art book. American Folk Art of the 20th Century. has all the folk art stars. And I sold him a piece that big with about 7 carved people on it. This is all rock. And a couple of headstones.
Mhm.
And it was like a funeral.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go a couple of more pieces. And you can see this can just go on forever.
There's stuff all over the house.
There's stuff all over the house, and I will give a little tour of the house. Maybe. Tell us about this one. Oh, with the iron head. That looks.
You're talking about that lead head?
Yeah, I think so. Right in front, right there.
With the
with
kind of crowning?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, I got this pyramid-shaped long piece of wood. I think it was a packing crate for something else, but the form was so enticing to me that I bought it at a market. And the chain that's around it is beryllium. It's not brass. And the reason it's beryllium, it was used in a mine where they're always using picks, and the gas, if the pick struck it and it was brass, it would cause an explosion with the gas that might.
Wow.
Beryllium does not spark.
Ah.
Now the top, at 2 different places, I found 2 different lead sculptures made out of sheet lead. And I combined the head onto the body, and it was obviously a Toulouse-Lautrec kind of
Yes.
person. And above I put an old stove,
Wow.
stovepipe
Right.
drying rack.
Wow.
Which, the way it looks, is like a big tiara on the...
Yeah.
This is Toulouse's homage to Cleopatra.
Delightful. And let's just go. Oh, what about that pointy thing? There's an interesting history there.
That's called Merlin's Round Table.
Okay, and tell us about
It
Merlin's
looks like
Round
a
Table.
Sorcerer's hat.
Right.
There's one eye at the top of the point.
Oh, there is.
The bottom is made out of
There she is.
two pulley wheels from old wells.
Yes. Oh my
And
God!
the
Look at
center
that.
one, the big one that's most of the object, actually still turns.
Oh,
And if you want to play with the table, you can just spin it.
spin the table. Wow. And that wheel next to it. Let's just talk about that. Just to.
That was a model of a water wheel, the yellow part. The green crate is something I found. The wooden pedestal is another thing I found. The colors are kind of very close to one another. And I loaded it with numbers, old nickel-plated numbers, and it spins freely.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you can see it, but at the top there's a red wooden arrow.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever that arrow was when it came out, if it landed on a 7, you were lucky. There were only 2 7s and all the rest are 2s.
I got it. Yeah.
That there?
No, the one. Well, this.
Oh, this.
It looks like out of Star Wars or something.
This is a sculpture that was made by a guy who came back from Vietnam and had to get out some of that post-traumatic stress stuff.
Stress, yeah.
And he used rebar and made
Oh, so this is not your
figures.
sculpture?
No, this is not mine. I don't work like that. I
Ah.
assemble things.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the top was a Halloween mask made by Woodstock's John Pike.
Ah.
I just put the mask on there because it was a perfect
Oh, it was perfect fit.
holder for it.
So you did put that together then.
Yeah, but I don't count
But
that.
they
as a
don't
piece.
count that. Okay, we won't.
All the human yokes.
Okay.
These are the things you always see with a farmer holding on his shoulder, his wife holding on his shoulder with the neck inside, and
Yes.
a bucket here and a bucket here.
Okay.
Now, I've collected many of these things, and very rarely do you find one of these that has original paint on it. Most of them were just carved in wood and left that way. But these have all been painted, and the old paint is there, visible. And once again, there's a piece that I made using all the great painted ones that I have in one piece.
And the name of the piece is?
It's called A Real Pain in the Neck.
A real pain in the neck, and it is. Yes, it must be, right?
Well, it was always a pain in the neck for each one.
Each one. Right?
There are
Two.
6 of them.
6, yep.
To
Yeah.
give you a real pain in the neck.
Going to do, and there's actually, you can talk about that picture. You want to talk, there's a picture
Sure.
of yourself. Go ahead.
That portrait was painted by Lois Woolley.
Okay, tell us
Who's
about
one
her.
of Woodstock's finest
Move.
painters.
Okay.
And she's married to Han Yen, and he's a famous Chinese painter, but American now. And I was standing kind of right over there. Right there I was standing on the, holding the banister here.
Mm-hmm.
And she took a photo of me, and she went home and painted that
Painted
painting.
that.
And she really did a great job.
Yeah. And this one here, let's just get one more in here because I'm fascinated by it.
What are
This
you pointing
the blue one with the hand on
Yeah,
it.
that's called Springboard to the Blues. Now, those things that go across there, they used to come in strips of 8. They're from the 1850s, and they were used as bed springs. They were put across the bed. And I found these all broken, but I said, these are too good to not, they weren't expensive. And I said, I'm going to make a piece out of these.
And they're made out of?
They're made out of wooden springs.
Wow.
And
Oh,
the
I see.
1850s bed
Oh, I see the springs. I'm going to...
And actually, you can play with the piece. You can hit the springs, the wood circles, with your hand, kind of at the edge, but front. You push it.
And they'll
push
spring.
on them. No, that's the hand.
No, I'm trying to get to the spring with the camera right here.
There.
Oh, so
There.
they do.
See? No, don't push it from the center. Hit it from the side. Yeah, that.
Oh, I see.
And all of them, you can hit them all at the same time.
I see.
The sculpture you can play with.
It's a color. And the thing in the middle, that...
That's an old light reflector.
Right.
But if you're standing in front of it and it's moving, you can see yourself moving constantly.
Delightful. And that's one really, I think, exceptional thing about what you do is you're not just throwing things together. You have the knowledge of the
No,
antique.
it's not just throwing things together.
Yeah, you have
It's
the
far from that.
yeah. It's the knowledge of the antique.
It's the
and
creativity also.
yes,
It's what you choose, how you associate pieces to each other.
yes,
You want to give each one the greatest advantage you can by being used correctly with other pieces.
and you could see how you could just go on and on. What is that one with the heads in?
Oh, those were probably drugstore display mannequins' heads. And they're very unusual. I've never seen any others like them. And there's another example of where I put a lot of rare things together to make one piece. And I put these in a case. I sold a piece to a psychiatrist that was like a large jar filled with those heads.
Really? What'd you call that one?
Way past their expiration date.
And this one, what do you call this
This
one?
one is a real head case.
This is great. That's great.
And a psychiatrist bought the first one.
All right.
This is the den. The living room is the room we...
This is the den. Okay, so here we see another room just covered with art. You want to talk about that one with the gate?
The one with the chicken?
You can do the chicken. I like the chicken.
Well,
That's a good one.
I call that which came first.
Okay.
You know.
Chicken or the egg? Chicken or the...
Yeah, the chicken or the egg.
And the eggs are made out of?
Wood.
Wood. Oh. And this
The one
one?
to the right,
Yep, that's the one.
that was, I call that red sky over Amsterdam.
Now, why do you call it that?
Well, because the board, while not being red, is a very rare color for a very early board. It's like pinkish red.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane in the sky is almost like a threat.
Mm-hmm.
The pieces below, the gate as you called it, are old hinges, but they have good points on them, which also is a threat. And the little flowers between those are handmade, cut steel and painted, circa 1930s tulips.
Tulips. So
Which
there's
kind
the
of
Amsterdam.
Implies Amsterdam.
There we go. Delightful. Okay, and just to give, again, this viewpoint of this artistic wonderland we're in.
You see that head on the dog, on the piece there, the head in the
Oh, there we go. In the center or on the centerpiece or the...
The centerpiece, you see the head in the middle.
Yes.
Looks like a dog head, right?
Oh, well, I don't know. Let me see. It's hard for me to see, actually. Huh.
No human made that head. That was a piece of driftwood that I found that is in the perfect shape of a dog head.
With the tail coming down.
No. Just the head itself.
They don't really see it.
Look in the center of the piece. You'll see the head.
Oh, the center. Ah, sorry. There it is.
That whole piece is called Memories of a Great Dog.
Wow, beautiful. And that is a great dog. And you
That head
just
was not
found
made
that.
by
That is amazing.
Watch out.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. That is an amazing piece.
See, you see how I work very often from the centerpiece, the germination,
Right.
the germ of the piece. The head was such an incredible object.
It's an incredible object.
Everything went out from there.
Everything emanated from there. Beautiful. And the ironish piece.
With the brass hooks.
Yes.
I had been to Florida, New York, and when I was there, I stopped in an antique shop that I had never seen before, and they had just gotten a whole box of these hooks from an old hotel that was taken apart.
Right.
They didn't have the loops that the hooks went
Ah, so they
into,
sold.
but I still loved the hooks.
Yeah, the hooks are
So I
amazing.
decided I have to find a way to use these hooks
Right.
that don't involve the loops.
Right.
And what I came up with is I made almost a skeleton,
Yes.
and it's called So Many Ways to Get Hooked.
Perfect.
And the top, the face,
Yes.
it looks like a really damaged face.
Yes.
But what it is, it's one of the 4 pieces that went on a horse with horseshoes to walk on a soft ground.
I'm
To help
sorry.
them walk on soft earth. They had their iron horseshoes,
Right.
and these were attached. This round
Oh, that's
was a
amazing.
horseshoe piece.
Wow. So they would be able to walk
Walk on a
through.
softer ground.
Wow.
Like snowshoes.
Wow. That's amazing.
And that also is totally accidental. That face.
Yeah, that was really. In what way? What do you mean? Oh, because it just
It was
happened.
made to be put on the shoe.
Oh, right,
On
right,
the
right, right, right,
iron
right, right,
horseshoe.
right. Now that's a wondrous piece. Look at that. And that just about sums up Lenny.
And I found
his
that
art.
piece at a market, just almost no money.
Yeah. Delightful.
Because I could use it, but
Right.
most of the rest of the world couldn't see buying that.
Couldn't see behind that. Which is the world of Lenny Kislin.
Part of the magic.
Part of the magic. Kind of your, in a way, respect for
Absolutely.
these pieces.
Absolutely. It took, as I said before, it took a great deal of time for me to be able to put little screw holes into the backs of the pieces.
Because you couldn't do it.
Because I didn't want to make those holes.
Wow.
But eventually I figured the only way I'm ever going to be able to do this stuff is making screw holes into the backs.
Did you ever envision yourself as an artist?
No. No, I was a good drawer when I was a kid. But I never envisioned really doing it in my life.
So looking back upon your life, how would you, I don't know, how do you put it together? How do you summarize
Well,
it?
the art came by accident.
Right,
All the things I was seeing out in the fields of markets, they were yelling to me. They were actually saying, I'm good for art.
wow.
I'm going to be good for art. And as I told you the story of that first piece was like whammo.
Right,
And not only was I satisfied or happy with the piece itself, but actually selling it for a great deal of money, giving me another place to make some money, which was very important because when I didn't go into law, I knew I was going to have to probably find something really special to actually enjoy doing and make money from. And that was the art.
and tell me somewhat, just about, what is art to you now?
Everything.
Just tell me
Not
about
everything, but it's really my spirit. Art to me is, besides nature, everyone loves nature, but art to me thrills me. Whenever I see really good art, it thrills me. It just makes me feel like there was a time when I always liked what nature did. I liked how nature carved mountains. I liked how nature made stones and rare, semi-precious and precious stones. And I didn't think or concentrate on what man could make. Then I was opened up. Maybe it's the trip I took to Europe and saw all those beautiful sculptures and artworks on the walls. Whatever it was, I finally got grabbed by people doing things that were artistic.
Okay.
And I just went with it. It just absorbed me. Art to me is like my favorite thing.
And I'll ask you, well, Woodstock. Just tell me about what Woodstock means to you as an artist, as a person.
The first time I was in, the first few years in Woodstock was torture.
It was hard with this.
Very, very hard. I couldn't go to town. I didn't have money to go to town. To go to the flea market the first year, I used to have to call a cab to take us to the flea market with some boxes. It was very hard. This house absorbed everything. And you've heard of the money pit. This was a money pit.
Was it frightening for you?
Absolutely.
It was.
Absolutely. And that's why I felt, when I went on this buying trip, I felt like, well, this is a real possibility.
Right.
I never realized how great it was going to become, how
Right.
important this was going to be the business of my life.
Right, right.
This was going to be the source of my income, and not only that, but the source of great pleasure and excitement, hunting for rarities,
Right,
and using my brain and my eyes to find these things.
right.
And it kept bringing in money, and the money kept giving me the ability to buy more. And it was like that kind of growing thing.
Right.
Till eventually we wound up doing the most important American folk art show in the world,
Right.
in New York.
Right.
That was the Fall Antique Show.
And is that the one you alluded to before, or?
No, that was a show at a guy's gallery.
Okay, what was this next?
And I also did shows on the pier at the Hudson River, but the Fall Antique Show was strictly selling antique Americana.
And you were part of that?
I was one of the dealers there for about 11 years.
I see.
And it was amazing. We always wanted to get into that show because we saw pieces that we sold to dealers who were in the show sell for 10 times and more
Right.
what we charged.
Right.
And it was very frustrating because we had the stuff,
Right.
but we were forced to sell to the dealers who sold the stuff.
Right.
Because we didn't have the venue yet. We weren't respectable enough,
Right.
important enough. So we just kept plugging away. And finally, the occasion came up. I was saving great stuff. because I knew I wasn't getting the right kind of price for it. I wasn't in the position yet of getting the right kind of price. So I'd save some of all my favorite things. I didn't want to just throw them out there. I could tell you about mistakes I made. I have never had a success that was anywhere near the amount of money of my failures.
Tell us about that.
At a Ridgefield Market, it's in Massachusetts. It happens 3 times a year, 3 weeks out of the year. And I go to one field and bring back stuff for my wife at the field we were doing, and she would sell that, and I'd bring other stuff. I bought tons of stuff there. And one day I bought this statue about that long. The wood was amberized from touch. You know, somehow wood develops an amberish look to it,
Yes.
from being touched and rubbed and oil from the skin. And it was a beautiful carving of a man lying down, and he seemed somewhat thinned by time or lack of food. He was emaciated. I bought it at one booth on a field across the street for $25. I brought it over to my booth. My wife sold it in 5 minutes for $150. 10 years later, we're at a friend's house who's one of the really high up Native American dealers.
Right.
And I'm looking through a book he has, and I come to my piece in the book.
Right.
And I say, we had this. And he looks at me and said, no, you didn't. I said, yes, we did. And we described the whole process that I went through. The people who bought it from us put it into an auction 10 years later in England at Christie's. And it sold for $298,000.
Oh my God.
People say, how do you get over that? How do you get through
Because
that?
it was
the rarest pre-white man Easter Island carving on earth.
wow. Wow.
It was a killer.
Yeah.
Now I could go on with stuff like that,
Stuff like that.
but I don't want to.
Yeah, but just
I don't want to cry again.
So yeah, okay. So
So people say, how do you get over that? And I told them, look, you go on with your life when a loved one dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to go on.
Yeah.
So I decided that, look, bury it down somewhere, comes up once in a while.
And you still feel it.
I've made good stories out of these losses.
It's worth the story.
They're good stories.
It's worth the story. Okay. So now, just to conclude, just anything you'd like to say or any thoughts you have, just to kind of put closure on this interview here, or this delightful.
Well, I always appreciate when I can talk about my life.
Ah.
I enjoy talking about my life because to me it's been really interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can transmit that interest to someone else. It's an interesting story.
It's a
In fact, I
fascinating
made an
story.
outline not too long ago from my first memoir.
Right.
And it's called The Pet Shop Years.
Yeah.
I have so many stories from
Right.
when I was a kid,
Right.
and most of it is based upon the pet shop.
Wow.
I know it'd be a great story, but I almost cursed. I'm so lazy, and I'm so taken up by everything else that I'm doing
Yeah.
that I just can't get to that.
Yeah.
I have the outline all made out.
So let's conclude. Let's conclude with what Woodstock means to you, since I've
Woodstock is my heaven on earth.
tell us about that. That's a nice
Well,
way to end.
there's almost nothing else to say. It's beautiful. The people are really my kind of people. I can talk about everything with the people I'm friendly with here, and I'm friendly with a lot of people.
Right.
When I was chairman at the Woodstock Artists Association, I made all kinds of art friends.
Right.
And knowing, as you do now, how important art to me is,
Yes.
how could I get better friends? I mean, I have friends from college that we still get together
Right.
twice a year, and they're all great, and a lot of them come up and visit me, but the friends I have in Woodstock are really interesting.
Just interesting. Yeah.
I
Fascinating.
have
It's a
fun
fascinating
with a lot
world
of
here.
people.
Yeah.
in different ways.
Yes.
Like there are people that can satisfy me, the art people, the people I play poker with.
Right.
My kids, my grandkids live
Yeah.
3 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see them a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's treasure right there.
It's treasure. Okay, Lenny, thank you so much. It's been a delightful interview. And finally, I think if I can produce this thing, I'll have something to show.
Did you have film in the camera?
I think so. I hope so. I have to check. It seems like it's on record.
Because I'm not going to be able to talk this
Oh,
way
well,
again.
if I'm back knocking on your door tomorrow, you know. But that's what this show's about. Conversations over Cappuccino, which I'll give a little bit of a plug. It's very naturalistic and just kind of looking at life. Now, sometimes people will be exceptional, as Lenny clearly is, and sometimes it'll just be about people and how we all exist and what we do. But this was, it's just delightful to talk to you once
I
more.
love bragging about myself.
Yeah, you said I think this is going to be the best show ever. So from now on, it's all downhill.
That's what I said about when I had my first piece of art on Madison Avenue. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, well,
I went someplace.
You went. Okay, so Lenny Kislin, thank you so much. It's really been a delight, and really it's been a fascinating tour of your really unbelievable life. Not only as a evolution of an artist, but really what you've given back to the community with your, which is where I first found out about you, and the you know, in terms of the exhibitions you've set up and the artists you're now helping. You're an exceptional person. It's been just a delight to be with you today.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Say it again.
See you guys.
Perfect.
Gals.
Perfect.